2 weeks ago, when I was up here last on this end of our parishes, I invited us to reflect upon where we've been through the external, structural, leadership type changes in our family of parishes. I also noted that even more important than that are the internal or cultural, spiritual type changes. That flourishing of our parishes requires the internal renewal of the life of faith. And we've already been striving to live out the vision from the Archdiocese of one church, encountering disciples, equipping disciples, living mercy. But our challenge is to build upon that for the future. And so I mentioned last time we have a new initiative for prayer and evangelization formation that we are beginning in our parish family. And so I just mentioned it a little bit last time, but I want to give you more details this time. And that initiative, to remind you again, is called Ignite. It's an outgrowth of our previous School of Mission program, fulfilling our desire to go deeper in prayer as the foundation of forming a culture of evangelization within our parishes. And the name Ignite, I mentioned last time, came from the image of fire that's used in the scriptures to describe God's love, in particular the Holy Spirit and the form of fire that came down at Pentecost to ignite God's love within us so that we can share his life with others. And so Ignite has 3 parts. There are Ignite workshops that happen twice a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. There's upper room celebrations that'll happen twice a year, one in winter and one in summer. And then the Sunday Sparks portion that will kind of happen throughout the year. So to give you a little bit more, I didn't talk about last time, but the Ignite workshop, the first one will be Saturday, September 21st, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at St. Jane Francis in Randolph. And the format of this workshop is really to provide information, practical skills in prayer and evangelization. Growth in prayer is essential to becoming a missional parish, a parish that is sent on the mission that Jesus sends us on. We can only do that if we ourselves are in a relationship with Jesus that's ever growing deeper. It makes sense for Jesus in today's gospel to ask the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" Because they first must recognize that Jesus is the Christ. Otherwise, there's no way they're going to be able to go out and tell anybody else that he's the Christ, unless they themselves first understand who he is. And so it's the same way for us. We can't give what we don't have. And so the initial Ignite workshop will really focus a lot on the 4 habits of relational prayer, growing a deeper relationship with the Lord. Future workshops will include different topics regarding prayer, like discerning God's voice in prayer. It's usually called the discernment of spirits. How to recognize unique gifts or charisms that God gives to everyone in service of others. Future evangelization type topics will include practical skills and how do I share the gospel with somebody? How do I have my own kind of witness story, my own testimony? What are some best practices for forming a small group, if that's what I'm called to do? So if you want to join us for the first Ignite workshop, there's a link in the bulletin flock note, or you can call the office and let us know. We just need to know some numbers for meal. That will be part of it. There'll be future Ignite workshops, then the next one in the spring. But we also recognize in this kind of overall Ignite formation that we can't just focus on prayer just twice a year in a workshop like that. We've kind of had the tendency in the church to emphasize prayer, especially during Advent and Lent, but those seasons are really meant to enhance the prayer life that we should have the whole year long. But I think sometimes, after those seasons, we might go back to normal life, where maybe our prayer isn't all that great. But if we do that, then shouldn't be surprised that, nothing really changes in our relationship with God. We need to constantly walk with the Lord, as today's psalm says. And that's where the second part of the Ignite, what we're calling Sunday Sparks, where that comes in. So Sunday Sparks will be after each Saturday and Sunday Mass, every other weekend, on one end and then on the other end of the family. The first Sunday Spark here at Holy Trinity is September 29th. For a Spark, what you'll be invited to do is, after Mass, you're invited, if you wish to remain, for a short presentation that I'll be giving on some aspect of prayer. And it's not that, I myself have any, I'm better at teaching that than anybody else, but I struggle with prayer just as anyone does. And that's kind of the point, is that from my priestly heart, I want to introduce you more and more to the spiritual tradition of the church and the wisdom of the saints with regard to prayer. The Sparks are designed to give you very short, practical bits of wisdom to be able to apply to your personal prayer. If you struggle with prayer, like I do, how to make a more personal connection to God in my prayer, how to navigate the ups and downs of the spiritual life. How do I recognize God's voice? How do I know He's the one who's speaking to me in prayer? How do I deal with things like distractions and so many more kinds of things? If those sound like, I could get something from that. They could be a source of continual heat for our flame, sparks, so that it helps us to remain more constant in our personal prayer. So Sunday Sparks can give us a language to think and speak about prayer and provide us opportunities for fellowship, sharing, for support. Now, I know some might hear about this and respond with some hesitancy. Something that's ongoing, like these Sparks, may sound like a lot. Ideally for Sparks, we wanted to meet in a way that would make it easier for people to talk to each other about prayer. And so we're thinking about doing it in a location apart from the church to facilitate that conversation so it doesn't just feel like a homily, an extra homily. But that would require assistance of volunteers to help us with the hospitality. And I know there's probably, especially for those who volunteer a lot, a kind of fatigue for having to participate in so many parish and school things. And not to mention all the stuff we have in our own lives. Not another thing, Father. I understand. And maybe we don't need this. Maybe we already feel like we pray well enough. But maybe we've fallen into the trap of doing so many good things that we really haven't considered, should we be doing all those things? Jesus told one faithful woman, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. You see, there's only one thing that's necessary, and that is to sit at the feet of Jesus, to sit at his feet in prayer. And when everything seems to be going hectic and wrong around us, there is only one thing that is wrong. You miss the Lord. The church teaches us that there are two main sources of God's grace, of his life, and that is the prayer and sacraments. They're the two main ways that we meet God, sacraments and the prayer. And the last 3 years, we've concentrated upon the sacrament of the Eucharist in particular as the source and summit of our Catholic life. So we went through the National Eucharistic Revival. And so it makes sense that our next step would be to concentrate upon personal prayer as the other essential half of how we meet the Lord. And it's so providential that we're beginning our Sunday Sparks this year, since 2024 was actually declared to be a year of prayer by Pope Francis. You might not have heard about this because of our emphasis on the Eucharistic Revival, but Pope Francis has declared 2024 to be a year of prayer in preparation for 2025, which is a Jubilee year of hope. And so months ago, Pope Francis said that this year, 2024, should be a year dedicated to rediscovering the great value and absolute need for prayer in one's personal life, in the life of the church, and in the world. The absolute need for prayer in our personal life. Makes me think of something that St. John Chrysostom, whose feast day we celebrated this past Friday, an early church father who very simply and eloquently put it this way: as moisture is necessary to the life of plants to prevent them from drying up, is prayer necessary for our salvation. As moisture is necessary to the life of plants. Farmers, you know this more than anybody, right? Consider what kind of moisture would be your ideal. Now, I've heard that you'd like an inch of rain every week. Large amounts sporadically coming not really sufficient. Ideally, we want consistent amounts of rainfall week after week after week during the growing season. Otherwise, our crops will dry up. Well, St. John Chrysostom says that's how prayer works too. As moisture is necessary to the life of plants to prevent them from drying up, is prayer necessary for our salvation. So we should ask, what does my prayer look like? Am I getting my inch of prayer a week? Am I consistently going to the Lord in prayer each day? Or is my prayer rather sporadic or maybe non-existent? If we know our crops will die absent of that needed moisture, then what about our souls? If it feels like we're drying up, dying under the pressure of our hectic and complex lives, perhaps it is because our souls are starved of the rain of prayer. While we really can't do anything about making it rain for our crops, we have to rely completely on God's generosity. We can actively choose to participate in watering our souls with prayer. Consistency and perseverance to be faithful to prayer, even when we're tired or overwhelmed or overworked or feel like nothing's happening in it or wondering whether God actually even hears me. Remaining consistent in our prayer is hard. We go through ups and downs in our spiritual life. Some days it's easy to pray, other days it's almost impossible. And to aid us in this consistency, that's why the Sunday Sparks are designed as they are. Short, consistent, ongoing opportunities to talk and to learn about prayer, to support our personal prayer practices. Making the Sunday Sparks after Mass, each Mass, no matter which one you're at, looks like we'll probably do it here in the church for that short period of time. Now, I'm not sure how to make it any more easy or convenient for us. The only thing easier would be to do nothing at all. But if we're dissatisfied with our prayer life, doing nothing certainly won't change that. I want to make it clear that there's no expectation or requirement that you have to participate in these Sparks. I'm not trying to guilt anybody to staying after Mass, to participate in them, or to do more work or anything. It's simply my desire as your priest to help you with the one thing necessary for your life. Pope Francis says we need prayer. St. John Chrysostom says we need it. Jesus says we need it. I know that I need it. If only I were better and more faithful to it. And if you want to try something different, if you want help with the one thing necessary to make it a more consistent part of your life, consider in the coming weeks to join me for our Sunday Sparks.